We now turn to uncertainty. So we have a state space containing states of nature. We have an outcome set. Prospects are X, mapping states to outcomes. Preference relation over the X is given. We saw that case in the first meeting when in fact we were doing expected value maximization. Also in the fourth meeting, when then we were doing expected utility maximization using subjective probabilities. But all these approaches were classical. Now we want to get more empirical realism and get behavioral models. And to start, we go back to 1921. There were two economists, Keynes and Knight. They wrote influential books. The point was, in those days, there was the expected utility model for risk, but not much else was available. Now, these authors said the real uncertainty that is difficult to handle, the real challenge for a businessman, is new risks that we haven't seen before. For instance, unique events. Maybe now you face an uncertain event that never happened before. So you have no statistics, no probabilities available. It's a unique event. And then, if probabilities are available, you can do calculated risk. You can do you can organize insurances, hedges. You can see what the average is. But all those things are not available for these unique uncertainties that you never saw before, and you don't know probabilities. Also, in economics, most uncertainties are of that kind I just said. For most uncertainties in economics that you face, you don't know probabilities. So surely we solely need such a theory. It's what these authors argued. But for instance, financial crises, they always happen because of events that never happened before, that nobody thought could happen. So people have no theory, they don't know what to do, and no probabilities for sure. So that's a typical example. For instance, here is Trichet, the ex-governor of the European Central Bank. He wrote about such a financial crisis. We will not read it all. You can pause the video, read if you like. But he also said we felt abandoned by conventional tools. That things were happening that they had never seen before. Well, ambiguity, that means uncertainty when you don't know probabilities. And I already said it's the prevailing case in economics and business. Usually you can't do experiments with the macro situation of your country next year. Samuels and Nordhaus, they wrote about it. They said economists cannot perform the controlled experiments of chemists or biologists because they cannot easily control other important factors. In other domains, probabilities are more easily available. For instance, in the health domain, often we have medical treatment that we give to thousands of patients, so we know quite well the probabilities of side risks, but economics usually not. Well, the first answer to the problem that Keynes and Knight put on the table, we already saw it in this course. It was given by De Finetti and other people in similar spirit, some photos of these people. So they said, what you do, still use probabilities. If no probabilities are given, just take your best guess, whatever, and we can't call them objective, but then we call them subjective, and then it's business as usual. For instance, you can do expected utility maximization. So this was a proposal already, and I explained De Finetti's answer in the first meeting. Well, the way I present it now, it sounds a bit dumb and silly, but in fact there was deep thinking involved with these people. I think what De Finetti was deep, I tried to explain the first meeting, although I must say that some of the writings of De Finetti, I feel intellectual limitations going on. Anyway, Savage 54, he perfected what his predecessors did. To me, Savage 54 is the greatest contribution in all of decision theory. Then there was also Ramsey. He and De Finetti were independent, did not know about each other. Ramsey, he died at age 26, very young, unfortunately. Well, there were a few handwritten notes by him. That was it. Now, all of these notes people studied, and all of them became classics that have started whole fields of research, combinatorial mathematics, saving theory. We are lucky that also in our domain, decision under uncertainty, he had some handwritten notes. They came about because Ramsey was a protege of Keynes. Keynes got to know Ramsey when Ramsey was a teenager. Keynes immediately understood that this was an absolutely brilliant guy. So Keynes was like a father to him, gave him a place in the university, did everything for him. And that way, Ramsey noticed this 1921 book of his teacher. And he saw, Keynes was not the dumbest kid in class, so to say, but Ramsey was just other intellectual level. It was just nobody like Ramsey. So Ramsey decided, he saw his teacher was a bit confused on probability, so Ramsey wrote a few handwritten notes for his teacher to explain the concept of probability. Now, Ramsey, he was not an economist, he was a philosopher, methodology, politics interested him. But just out of nowhere, with nobody ever telling him, Ramsey just understood, oh, such a thing you could do well by using a preference foundation. So Ramsey, he just wrote the preference foundation of probability to help his teacher resolve his confusions. And just out of nowhere, that didn't exist preference foundation in those days. Ramsey didn't know about Definetti. He just out of nowhere, he understood that. And I presented Definetti's solution because it's a bit easier than Ramsey, but they are similar in spirit. But the Ramsey, he had methodology training, and his text, well, the first half of his paper he wrote himself. The second half, after his death, a friend completed. We're forever grateful to the friend, but that couldn't be the level of the first half. The first half of the paper is unbelievable. He understood so well all the methodological aspects of preference foundation, so the concept of subjective probability. It's a dispositional concept. In many respects, his texts are better than anything ever written after. But he died at age 26. We must forever regret it, and so be it. Anyway, let us look a bit more at the proposal that we see here. And if we look at part B, we have already seen that even if probabilities are available, so that's quite easy, there are many problems about expected utility maximization. That's part B. For instance, there's the LA paradox, many other violations. We have already considered, for instance, prospect theory, the theory to deviate from expected utility to accommodate the empirical findings. So that is already a problematic aspect of this proposal here. Now, I'm going to invite you to invent your first maybe theory for decision under uncertainty that deviates from expected utility. So let me put up the question. At this stage, I invite you invent a theory for decision making under uncertainty that deviates from expected utility. Pause the video, think for a while, and after you're done, come back. So I assume you're done thinking, but an easy way to proceed for uncertainty is to still do in part A what these people said. So still no probabilities are available, you just plug in probabilities, your best guess, subjective probabilities. So you still do that. But then you deviate in part B. Once you have those probabilities, you don't use the expected utility formula, but you use any non-expected utility formula for risk that we have already considered. For instance, you can do prospect theory maximization. So that way you get non-expected utility theory for uncertainty, and that's maybe quite easy to invent, but already we are on our way. People often call such approach probabilistic sophistication. So still you use probability to express your uncertainties, but then after you do something more general, that can deviate from expected utility. So that is probabilistic sophistication. And that is not so very difficult. So the answer that these people gave and what we discussed so far suggests that uncertainty may not be so very different from risk. Well, you have to have subjective probabilities instead of objective, but other than that, it's business as usual. Well, unfortunately, the case is not as easy as may seem from what I said so far. This was put on the table by Ellsberg 61. Daniel Ellsberg, 1961, he published a paradox showing a simple example, showing that really it does not always work that way. We really need more fundamental deviation from probability. There are many situations with nothing like probability can work. Very simple paradox showing it very convincingly. Now we're going to show it in the next recording, but before that, Ellsberg is also more known for something else, especially in the United States, because he did in 1960s, he made public some very confidential Pentagon papers about the Vietnam War. So that quite showed the general public all kind of pleasant information, and it's played quite a role in the general public being against the Vietnam War. In the end, the Vietnam War was finished, but he had just published confidential papers doing that, which was a crime, and he was the most sought criminal in the United States for a while. He's more well known for having done that. In the end, he was not convicted, but he didn't have to go to prison. So let's be glad he could write papers for our FIP also. But we'll go back to his work of decision theory in next recordings.